When I made my last video on macro photography, one of the techniques I failed to mention was macro photography stacking. Now there's a really good reason why I didn't mention that technique, and that's the reason being I'd never used it before. So, you know me, I enjoy a challenge, and in this video I thought, yeah, let's do some macro photography stacking. I mean, how difficult can it be? So what is macro photography focus stacking? Well, really all it is a technique of, rather than taking one macro shot of, say, a beetle, you'll take 10, 20, 30 shots of that same beetle in exactly the same position. But every shot that you take, you will slightly vary the focus point, so that rather than just getting, say, the eye of the beetle in focus and everything else is out of focus, you can change the focus slightly, and in some really clever software that will stack all those images together, align the images, and then pull out the different focus points from each image and stack them on top of each other and bring out the focus for each image on top of each other, which has the effect of giving yourself, rather than a very small depth of field, you'll end up with a much larger depth of field, which, as we've explained in macro photography before, when you're only taking one image, you always have the problem that you have a very shallow depth of field, which means that you can't get all of your subject in focus. This overcomes that, and what you'll also find is it often gives you a really sharp image as well. So that's the theory, and there are several techniques for getting those images. So let's have a look at those. Now the first one I'm going to discuss is probably the easiest way to get really consistent results, but the problem with it is it's not really a technique that I think that you can use in a lot of situations, and that's to put your camera on a tripod, set the camera up on the subject that you want to take an image of, and then basically just move the focus ring of the camera, take a shot, take another shot, take another shot, varying the focus point all the way through. Now that's very appealing because it's dead easy. The problem with it is that obviously if you're taking a picture of something like an insect, it's very dynamic. You don't really have time, a lot of that time, to set up a tripod. You know, you don't have the time or the actual physical form of trying to get a tripod into position when you're trying to do this technique and not disturb the thing you're trying to take a photo of. I would say this technique is, unless you're shooting really cold subjects, so if you've got a really cold morning and the insects aren't moving, you know, they're covered in dew or whatever, you can use this technique successfully. You can quietly set up your tripod, focus on that subject and take multiple images. For me, this system works really well if you're doing inanimate objects. So say you like doing flower photography or fungi photography, you can just spend as much time as you want setting this up, so getting the right angle on your subject, getting the points of focus that you really want and the points that you don't want in focus out of focus, and just really go to town. So for that, yeah, it's dead easy and a really, really good method. So for me, the next method that does actually work quite well for things like insects is using a tripod's one-legged brother, a monopod. Now for me, this is a little bit more versatile. You've only got one point that you've got to put into the ground near your subject, rather than trying to get three legs into position when you've got a skittish beetle or a fly or something that you're trying to get multiple images of. So with this, you've only got to place one leg in, which one leg, it's only a third of the problem. What I also use this method for is if I've got a particularly skittish subject and I don't want to lean into the subject particularly, because obviously that's something else that can scare the subject off. So normally, you know, if you've got your camera, I'll be looking through the viewfinder and I'm physically leaning all the way in. That can just have the effect of, particularly if you block out any of the sun and you get a shadow across your subject, it can just scare your subject off, and by the time you've got into position, it's gone. With this method, I see it being used more if you're using the LCD on the back of the camera. So what that allows you to do is keep a little bit more distance. The only thing that you're pushing in towards your subject is your camera on top of the monopod, and literally, you know, you can keep a little bit more distance, which sometimes has the effect of keeping your subject a little bit calmer and make it so it's not going to move out of the way. So yeah, this is a little bit more versatile. It's something I haven't used a lot of, but it's certainly one that I want to have more practice at, because I think there is a lot of potential in there with that one. Right, so the next method is by far the simplest, and that's just to use your camera and your macro lens. This is one of the techniques that I favour, and really it's just down to its simplicity. That's all the kit that you need, and when I'm doing this, what I try and do is, obviously because you're not using a flash, you need to have enough shutter speed to freeze the subject. So I normally go for something like 1/400th of a second and probably shoot about f8. Doing that means that you need to rely on having quite a lot of brightness. Like today in the woods would be a struggle, even though we've got some sunshine out, but because it's undercover here, would I get enough light? I might have to move the ISO up. But this technique in itself is all about technique. It sounds quite simple. What I also do is I put as I do with all these techniques, I have the camera on high speed shutter, so it's continuously shooting as fast as it can. And what I will do is have the camera cradled as best as I can, a nice solid base, and I'm trying to lean into a subject, and I don't change the focus ring on the camera. I leave it at whatever it is, and it will be my movement that changes that focus point. And really the first thing you notice when you do this is that those movements are minute. You think you've got to move over a subject, but that is just far too far. You know, you're way out the back of the subject if you're doing that. So it's really more about focusing on the subject and just taking loads of images, and actually there's a lot of natural movement, even though you think you're not moving, that will change the focal point of each shot. And it's often best just to try and keep as steady as you can and just rely on that natural movement that is there anyway, where the focus point will change without you actually trying to forcefully move backwards and forwards. That's what I've found anyway. So the last technique is using the camera with a macro lens on it and the flash. Again, in my other video, which I'll put a link up there too, I explain that I think this is the best system for taking macro images, because you're not so reliant on the amount of light you've got. Your flash is doing that work for you. I know sometimes people will say, well, you can't take multiple shots with the flash because the flash needs time to recycle. To be honest, because I'm shooting with this flash at only 1/32 of its power, it doesn't actually need to recycle, and it will take multiple images firing the flash off, which means that the flash is providing the light, freezing the image, and I can get multiple images in loads of different lighting conditions, and I know that they're all going to be exposed to the same level, and you know, perfectly frozen. That, for me, this is the most workable method that I've used. So anyway, they're the 4 methods that you can use for stacking macro images. I decided to rely on the last 2. So let's see what happened. So what happened? Well, if you look at my YouTube channel, you'll see that it's been almost a month since my last macro video that I did. And quite naively, when I started the process of doing this video, I thought, you know, all I was going to need to do was go out for a day, do a load of macro stacking shots, stack them all in the software, get the images, do this little bit of video, put it all together, and away we would go. It would all be done. Yes, it didn't quite work out like that, and that's for a number of reasons. Really, the first one, and the one that's completely out of my control, is the fact that the weather in Great Britain since the beginning of July, and we're now after the first week of August, has been horrendous. It's been horrendous actually, but I wouldn't swap it for what the people have got the other side of the jet stream. We've just had loads of Atlantic weather systems coming in, and it's just been windy, rainy. Really, we haven't, I mean, today is probably one of the first days, and it's not guaranteed to stay like this today. So yeah, the weather has really put a block on things, but that wasn't the major contributing factor. Right, so apart from the weather, which couldn't do a lot about, the first thing was that this is not as easy as it looks. It sounds quite a simple technique, and on the face of it, yeah, you wouldn't think it would cause too much of a problem, but I found just getting the technique right, and to be honest, I haven't mastered it yet. I'm getting better, but this is really a technique that takes a lot of practice. As I say, unless you're shooting on a tripod and doing something like flowers or fungi that aren't moving, that's dead easy. You just vary the focus on your lens, a little minute bit of time, take a shot, another bit, take a shot, stack them all in the software, easy. Once you start with something that's moving, on something that's moving, and you're moving, trying to get those three things to come together to get a stack that has different focus points all the way through and will line up properly, and you know, you've not got any poor shots in there that are going to cause an issue, is really, really difficult. And the first thing I found is that I was moving too far, because as I say, my technique is I don't try and focus the lens. I will keep the lens focused at the same point and just have minute body movements to try and take different shots at different focus points over that insect. And the first thing is, you know, those movements are so small. What I've found is I'm better off more or less staying exactly where I am. I'm relying on those micro movements that you do anyway, because you're not 100% stable. The thing that your subject is on might not be 100% stable either, so that might be moving. You know, we've got a little bit of a breeze today, quite a lot actually, so it would be really difficult today. But if you've got any sort of breeze and it's just moving the item that the subject is on slightly, again, it's just everything's moving, and it just causes real problems. So the first thing that you need to do is only shoot this, I would say, on days that are conducive to do it. Get the best conditions that you can, so that what you want to do is cut out as much movement from the insect and from the thing that it's sitting on as possible. Therefore, then the only thing that's going to be moving is yourself, and it just cuts down those variables. But as I say, this technique just takes practice. You're going to have to practice, practice and practice. One tip that I would give you is that what I tend to do now, and I've done this actually, it's a tip that I use when I'm doing maybe a panoramic shot in landscape photography. So what I will do is at the start of the shooting, I'll take a shot with my thumb in front of the lens, and then I'll do all my shots. So with macro photography, what I'll do is before I start the stack, I'll take one image with my thumb, or just blocking the lens, anything to block the lens, and then I'll do my stack. And then when I finish that stack of shots, I'll either put my thumb up again or just take a blank shot, you know, put the lens cap on, or just cover it with my hand, so that I know that that is that finished stack. Then when I take the next stack, which might be the same thing, but maybe the grasshopper that I'm taking a picture of has slightly moved its position. Now, if I don't do that, it's very difficult to know where one stack ends and one stack begins, and you might be trying to stack images that aren't exactly identical. So just by doing that, it means that you know where one starts, you know where one ends, and it just then means that you're not trying to stack things that don't quite match, that you might not notice with your naked eye, and that could cause problems with the software when it's trying to align and stack these images together and bring out those focus points. And the second thing, not surprisingly, that has caught me off guard and caused me more problems than I thought it would, is using the actual software. And I don't think, I mean, I use Affinity Photo to do this. There's a focus merge, much like Photoshop or anything else. It's got a system for doing this. They'll all be very similar. So I wouldn't think that Affinity Photo is any different to anything else. It's all automated, but what I would say to you is, what I have found is that, and I can sum it up in really one word, if you put rubbish in, you'll get rubbish out. What I mean by that is, if you take 30 images, you take 30 raw images, you have a quick glance at them, they all look all right, you put them into your software, it stacks them all, aligns them all, and then gives you a final image which you can then, you know, edit as much as you want, and you look at it and you think, that's not quite right, that's not quite in focus, it looks like a double exposure. The problem with it is if one of those images is bad, it will affect all the other 29 images. So what I would say is you really need to examine each image individually. You've got to be the quality control of the images that you put in. And if that means your stack is smaller because you're discounting a few images, then so be it. But what I've found with my limited exposure to doing this technique is that if I just willy-nilly put all those images in thinking, yeah, they'll be fine, what happens is you get one bad apple in there and it just ruins the whole image. So what I've started to do is process those images into TIFF files initially, which means that I'm examining the images in a lot more detail, which then means that I'm less likely to put one of those crappy images in that is just going to make the whole stack rubbish and that final image just, you know, not what I want it to be. So let's take a look at a couple of images I have taken. This is a grasshopper. As you can see, the front legs, the eyes and the antennas sharp, but I could really have done with a few more stacked images just to get the back legs of the grasshopper in focus. So a reasonably good shot and more depth of field than I had with one individual image. Again, here with this fly, you can see the eyes are in focus, the front legs are in focus, which wouldn't normally happen with one single shot unless you were using a really small aperture. Just a little bit more depth of field I think required at the back on those back legs again. And I really want to show you this because I want to show you what happens when something does go wrong. This was a stack of about 30 images, and for some reason, I don't know why, it looks like a double exposure. The hairs are all doubled up. It makes you look like you've had one too many drinks when you look at it, to be honest. And I spent ages trying to find the shot that was wrong in there, and I still haven't been able to find it. So yeah, you really have to be careful and examine those shots before you put them into the software. Right, I really hope you've enjoyed this video this week. I've enjoyed making it. It's been a little bit of a trial at times. This is all new techniques to me, so I don't want you to think that this is me telling you what you should be doing. It's been by no means that. I've just introduced a few of the techniques that I've been using and that you can use. Obviously, if there are others, which there will be, stick them down in the comments below. Anything that you've used and has really helped you with this technique, because I've found it a real challenge. Enjoyable, but challenging. I really do like the handheld techniques at the minute. Obviously, if you can use a tripod on your static subject or something like that, that is going to be the best way of doing it because you're in much more control. I think the monopod, I think that does have legs. Well, it has one leg anyway. I need to use that technique a little bit more. I think it just offers you a little bit more control, and in some situations, you know, that can be a real boon. Anyway, this video continues to get longer as more and more techniques come online and I try more and more different things. As I say, it's been brilliant. Really like to try new techniques, and yeah, I hope it's given you some food for thought as well. As I say, comments, stick them below. They'll help everybody who watches the channel, and that's really all we're here to do, so that we can all be better photographers, me included. See you for the next one.